He didn't even breathe before he said it. Not a pause, not a tremor, just a cold slice of a sentence that cut straight through my chest. Dad, I sold the beach house. And Mom's tools. We needed the money. Don't make this harder than it has to be. That was the first thing my son said to me, while I was sitting alone in a cardiology waiting room, the smell of disinfectant still clinging to the air like a warning. No hello. No how are you. Just that. And right there with the heart monitor beeping behind the half-open door, I swear something inside me cracked clean in half. Before I take you deeper into what happened next, let me introduce myself properly, because if you're watching this video right now, if my story somehow found its way to your screen, well, I want you to understand exactly whose life you're stepping into. My name is Walter Hayes. I'm 62 years old. And this is the story of how my only son tried to strip me bare and walk away smiling. If you're listening, do me a favor, like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're hearing my revenge story from. I want to know how far my voice is traveling, and I want to know what you would have done if the person you loved most stabbed you in the back without blinking. Because that's exactly what happened to me. The phone was still pressed to my ear when Michael added almost impatiently, "Dad, don't make that sound. Don't act like this house is sacred or something. Mom's gone. You don't need it anymore." Sacred. He said it like the word was a joke. Like the boards of that house didn't still hold Linda's laugh. Like my wife didn't design that place by hand, every room, every window, every damn nail hammered with a purpose. He said it like he didn't grow up running barefoot across those old cedar floors, dripping seawater everywhere, shouting for his mother to watch him build sand forts on the shore. He said it like he hadn't once told me, "Dad, promise me, you'll keep this place forever." And just like that, just like flicking ash off a cheap cigarette, he threw it all away. I remember staring at the floor in the clinic, at the harsh green linoleum under my boots, thinking, this can't be real. Not Michael. Not my boyfriend. Not like this. But the truth came fast rolling toward me, like one of those winter waves that slam the Maine coastline hard enough to shake the bones of a man. He had done it. He and Sophie, his wife, all ambition and no roots, had sold everything they could get their hands on. My wife's tools, her bench, her carving knives, her lathe, her chisels worn smooth by years of her hands. Everything she touched when she was still alive. Sold, gone. Just inventory for their next investment opportunity in Houston. He didn't even hesitate. "Michael," I whispered, but it came out weaker than I intended. My throat tightened. Not from age, not from illness, from betrayal. He mistook my silence for agreement. "We'll send you 30% of the money," he said. "That's what's fair. 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 30% of my own home. 30% of the soul of my marriage." I swear I felt my pulse skip just once, but long enough that the room darkened around the edges. "Dad, I don't have time to explain," he rushed on. "Sophie and I leave for Texas tomorrow morning. This is our chance. Don't ruin this for us. Okay, just move on. Move on." As if grief were a coat I could just shrug out of. As if Linda's memory were clutter I needed to sweep from the corners of my life. And then he hung up. No goodbye. Not even a breath shared. Just silence. Heavy, sterile, hospital silence. But here's the part Michael didn't know. The part that saved me. The part that doomed him. I didn't break. I didn't yell. I didn't curse him the way any other father might have in that moment. Instead, I closed my eyes, and I saw Linda. 3 months before she died, she pressed a small wooden box into my hands. The grain was warm under my fingers, the lid carved with her initials. "Only open this," she said, smiling faintly through the pain, When you're standing at the edge of something you can't climb back from. She knew me. She always did. She knew our son, too, better than I ever dared admit. And sitting in that waiting room, heart pounding in my ribs, I realized this was the edge. This was what she had warned me about. I checked myself out of the clinic early. The nurse frowned when I stood, but I waved her away. "I've got something I need to take care of," I said. And as I walked out to the parking lot, the cold Atlantic wind cut across my face so sharply it almost felt like the sea itself was telling me, "Walter, it's time." The drive back to my house in Rockport felt longer than it ever had before. The tires hummed. My hands shook only once on the wheel. My wife's wedding band, tied to a leather cord around my neck, tapped softly against my chest with every bump on the road. When I stepped inside the house, smelled like cigar and dust. Quiet. Too quiet. I went straight to the hallway closet, the one place I could never bring myself to clean after Linda passed, and I pulled out the wooden box that she left behind. For a moment, I just held it, ran my thumb over the carved lines, closed my eyes. "Linda," I whispered, "whatever you left for me, I hope it's enough." Then I opened the lid. And what was inside changed everything. Not just that day, not just that year. It changed the entire balance of power. It changed the ending of my story, and Michael's too. If you want to know what was inside that box, stay with me. Because the game was no longer going the way my son thought it was. Not anymore. When I lifted the lid of Linda's wooden box, the first thing I saw wasn't money, or deeds, or any kind of legal miracle. It was her handwriting. Sharp, precise, confident. The kind of handwriting she used when she wanted me to pay attention, not just with my eyes, but with my whole damn soul. Under the letter were several documents, folded with the care of a woman who always believed order was a kind of love. But the letter, I had to read the letter first. Her voice filled my mind as I unfolded it, as familiar as the tide brushing the rocks below our deck. "Walter, if you are opening this, it means you've reached a moment I prayed would never come. But I know people change, especially when grief moves through a family like a storm. If Michael ever loses his way, protect yourself first. And protect him, even if it must be through pain. Love, Linda." I sat down. Hard. Like gravity doubled for a second. Because Linda never wrote in riddles. She didn't hint. She knew. She saw the storm long before I ever felt the first wind. Under the letter was the first stack of documents. The deed to the beach house. My beach house. Linda's beach house. The house Michael claimed he'd already sold. The official title was crisp and new, filed 5 months before she was. We'd always held the deed jointly. After all, we built that place together, nail by nail. But now it bore only one name, mine, Walter Hayes. In the corner, clipped neatly, was another sheet, a revocation of power of attorney, dated 8 months earlier, legal, notarized, filed. Linda had removed Michael's access to anything: bank accounts, property files, titles, months before she even knew the cancer was going to win. She didn't trust him. Not anymore. That realization hit me like a cold wave across the face. Not because she was wrong, but because she'd seen what I refused to look at. The second stack hit even harder. Shares in a woodworking shop in Portland. Not a small one either. North Coast Furniture Company, a place Linda had loved wandering through on weekends, running her fingers along the grain of the handmade tables, admiring the joinery. She had secretly invested in it, and invested well. There were profit statements, healthy ones, some of them signed by the owner with little notes. "Linda, your eye for design keeps saving us. Mock-up approved." You're magic. I choked. Linda had lived a second life right under my nose. A life where she was more than a wife and mother. A designer. A partner. A woman with a future she never told me about. Maybe because she knew she wouldn't be there to see it. And then I saw the last piece. The one that stole my breath. A large folded sheet of paper. Architect's paper. Cream-colored, thick, beautiful. I unfolded it slowly. It was a blueprint of our house. Her lines precise as ever marked every beam, every window, every rise and fall of the roofline. But there was more details I'd never seen before. She had drawn the workshop facing the bay, with the big window Michael used to press his nose against as a child. She had added notes. Light falls best here in late November. Finish the deck rail with cedar. This view is where Walter thinks best. I had to put my hand over my mouth. She knew me that well. And then tucked in the corner, almost hidden beneath her measurements, was something that hit me harder than any betrayal Michael could ever deliver. A tiny sketch of the three of us. Backs turned to the viewer. Standing together on the deck facing the ocean. Under it, one sentence, home is what we fight for. It's strange how a memory can split open inside you, sharp, sudden, bright. The moment my eyes touched that sketch, I felt the Atlantic wind again. Not the gentle kind. The kind that threatens to peel shingles off your roof and send them cartwheeling to Canada. The nor'easter. Years ago, maybe 12, maybe 15, one slammed our coastline so brutally that the Weather Service told everyone to evacuate inland. But Linda didn't leave. She stood on the deck with her hood up, staring out at the black water like she was looking an old enemy in the eyes. We're not letting the house go, she'd said. Not after everything we built here. We spent that night hammering plywood over windows, dragging sandbags, securing beams in winds strong enough to knock down grown men. Every wave hit the rocks like a cannon blast. The air tasted like iron and electricity. And in the middle of that chaos, while I was certain this was how we'd die, Linda laughed. Laughed. Walter, she shouted over the wind hair whipping wildly. This house isn't scared. Why should we be? By morning, half the town was flooded. But our house stood firm. We spent that Christmas in the living room, drying out wet blankets by the fire. Michael played guitar. Linda sang off-key. And I thought, this is the safest place in the world. But now, my son had tried to sell it like an old tire. My hands tightened around the blueprint. Not in anger, in decision. I stood, took a long breath, and reached for my phone. There was only one person in Maine who knew how to navigate a betrayal like this with the precision of a scalpel. Rebecca Cortez, 50 years old, sharp as a winter tide. Linda's old attorney. She picked up on the first ring. Walter, Rebecca, he said, steadying my voice. I need your help. There was a pause. What did he do? Not what happened. Not what's wrong. She went straight to the truth, the one she already suspected. I looked at Linda's handwriting one more time. He tried to sell the house, I said. And I think Linda knew he would. Rebecca exhaled slowly. Then let's get your life back, Walter. How soon can you meet tonight? And just like that, the storm inside me finally shifted. Not away, no. Storms never really go away on the Maine coast. But it shifted into something with purpose, something hotter, sharper, simpler. Not revenge. Not yet. Just the first step. The step Linda wanted me to take. The step toward the truth. Rebecca's office sat on the second floor of an old brick building in downtown Rockport, the kind of place where the wood floors groaned like they were listening in on every secret ever whispered inside those walls. When I walked in, she was already standing, arms crossed, eyes sharp behind her glasses. Quiet, she said, which meant, you're not going to like this. I sat. She slid the documents toward her like dealing cards in a high-stakes game. Walter, she said, tapping the papers, Linda left me. Your wife was 10 steps ahead of everyone, especially your son. I swallowed. Tell me exactly what he did. Rebecca pushed her glasses up her nose. He attempted to sell property he had no legal authority over. That power of attorney he used, it was revoked 8 months before Linda died. Completely null. Meaning, she tapped the beach house deed. He sold something he didn't own. My jaw clenched. She continued, matter-of-fact, lawyer cold. The buyer technically never received valid title. We can file a quiet title action, void the sale, and freeze any transfer downstream. I'll submit a motion, first thing in the morning, to halt any funding disbursement from escrow. How long before the sale collapses ceases? Within 72 hours, she said. Faster, if the judge owes me a favor. And he does. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. What about Linda's tools? I asked. Rebecca flipped to a different document. The pawnshop transaction falls under UCCC Article 2 and Article 9. If we show lack of proper title and fraudulent conveyance, we can reclaim every piece. The shop has no right to keep them. For a moment, that nearly broke me. Those tools were all I had left of her hands. Rebecca watched me quietly. And the buyer of the house, I asked. Are they in trouble? No, she said. They're innocent. They'll get their money back. She paused. But your son won't. Silence dripped between us, thick as old varnish. Then she leaned forward. Walter, we can take this further. Fraud, intentional misrepresentation, breach of fiduciary duty. Her voice sharpened. This isn't just sloppy paperwork. He knew. He used an expired legal authority to steal from you. We can put him in prison. I looked at her. Really looked. Rebecca had known Linda. They'd worked together on pro bono projects, estate law, shoreline protection. She wasn't suggesting prison out of spite. She was suggesting it because it was justified. Do it. It. The anger in me whispered. Let him feel what he made you feel. But that wasn't the voice I listened to. The voice I heard was Linda's. Dubang moket dao. Even if it hurts. But she didn't say destroy him. She said protect him. I closed my eyes for a long moment. Then I said the words that surprised even me. No. I told Rebecca quietly. I don't want him prosecuted. Her eyebrows shot up. Walter, he stole your home, your memories, your wife's tools. You have enough evidence right here to. I'm not trying to ruin him, I said. I'm trying to teach him. Rebecca stared at me like she wasn't sure whether I was enlightened or insane. I kept going. If he goes to jail, he learns nothing except how to survive behind bars. If he gets away with it, he learns nothing except he can steal again. But if we take everything back silently, if the house returns to my name, the tools come home, the accounts lock up, and no one tells him why. I looked up. Then he has to face the life he built with his own choices, without blaming anyone but himself. Rebecca leaned back slowly. You want silent justice? No, I corrected. I want a lesson. One he can't lie his way out of. For the first time since I'd walked into her office, Rebecca smiled. Your wife would be proud, she said. We went through the plan line by line. Step 1, file the quiet title action. Void the sale. Step 2, freeze all downstream transfers. Step 3, retrieve Linda's tools under UCCC claim. Step 4, lock every financial account Michael had ever touched, joint accounts. Sub-accounts, custodial controls, anything tied to the revoked POA. Step 5, keep my involvement hidden. Step 6, let Michael discover slowly that everything he thought he owned never belonged to him. at all. Not revenge. Education. By the time we finished, the moon had climbed over the harbor, casting broken silver on the water outside her window. Rebecca closed her folder. "Walter, this won't feel good," she warned. "Even if it works. It never feels good when the heart breaks, Daisy." I nodded. My throat was tight. "This isn't about feeling good," I said. "It's about doing right." She held out her hand. I shook it. "We begin at sunrise." Outside, the night air was cold enough to sting my eyes. I walked slowly to my old pickup, the one Linda used to tap twice on the hood, before road trips, like she was blessing it. The engine rumbled awake, faithful as ever. I drove toward the coast, toward the dark shape of the house I once believed would outlive us both. The road wound along the cliff's sea spray, drifting up from the rocks below. Frost glittered on the guardrails. The sound of the Atlantic was a low growl in the distance. When I pulled into the gravel drive of the beach house, the headlights washed over the battered siding. The deck Linda designed, the windows we had sealed during the nor'easter years ago. The place was silent, but not dead. I stepped out. The wind carried the smell of cedar and brine, sharp and unmistakable. Then I walked to the workshop door, the one facing the bay, the one Linda drew on her blueprints like a promise. When I pushed it open, the hinge let out a long, aching creak. The smell hit me instantly. Cedar, salt, sawdust, memory. For a moment I closed my eyes, and I swear it felt like Linda was standing right beside me. The moon was hanging low over the Atlantic when I walked the slow path up toward the house Linda dreamed, sketched and shaped with more love than most people pour into an entire life. Even in the dark, even after weeks of strangers stepping through it during the illegal sale, it looked almost exactly like the place she had imagined. Cedar shingles silvered by years of salt wind. They glowed faintly under the porch light I'd left on months ago, the one she always called our lighthouse. The exterior boards creaked softly in the breeze, like they were greeting me, like they remembered the hands that nailed them into place. The porch faced the open ocean. That had been Linda's demand. If our home has a heart, let it beat toward the water. She'd draw it into every blueprint, no matter how many times the drafts changed. Even the angles of the deck were chosen, so the sunrise would fall straight through the sliding glass door every morning in October. She used to stand there with her coffee wrapped in her old red sweater, watching the tide pull away, like it was taking her thoughts with it. Now it was just me. I stepped onto the porch boots, brushing against the board she coated herself, and the sound echoed hollow, familiar aching. Inside, the air was cold but clean. Cedar salt and faint traces of the lavender oil Linda used to wipe the counters with. The living room sat untouched, the woven rug, the stone fireplace, the rocking chair she salvaged from a thrift store and restored over 2 long summer nights. But it was the workshop that pulled me like a tide. I walked down the narrow hallway, the floorboards groaning under my weight, as if they remembered my steps, then opened the side door. The workshop was the soul of the house. Even in the dark, it was warm somehow, still holding the echo of her presence. The big bay window was the first thing I see, looking out over the water exactly the way Linda designed it. She wanted natural light to pour over the workbench, she said, because wood deserves honest light. The workbench itself stood in the center like an altar, wide, heavy, oiled, smooth, with years of use. Built by Linda's own hands. The grain still shone golden where she sanded it religiously every winter. And along the right edge, under the clamp, there it was, a thin scar in the wood, the mark of a carving knife, slashing downward in a sloppy line. Michael had made that cut when he was 12, running into the workshop after a storm, grabbing a tool without permission. Linda didn't yell. She had just laughed and said, "Well, now, the bench knows you too." She carved the date next to the blemish, M12 yours. I traced my finger over it, feeling something between pride and grief twist in my chest. So much of our family lived inside this room, and so much of our family fell apart because the boy who made that mark never learned what this place meant. Not yet, but he would. The house was mine again, thanks to Rebecca's filings, thanks to Linda's foresight, thanks to the law being for once on the side of the heartbroken. Now I needed to protect it. I walked through each room, checking every window, every lock. Salt air makes metal rust fast on the coast, and I promised Linda I'd never let the house rot. I tightened loose bolts, secured the back door, closed storm shutters over the workshop windows, replaced dead batteries in the porch sensor lights. Then I took out the small canvas bag I brought with me. Inside was the one thing I knew would bring the house back to itself, Linda's seashell wind chime. She'd made it during the summer. Michael turned 9, stringing together shells she'd collected since childhood, each one washed by decades of tides. The sound had always been the soundtrack of our evenings, soft clinking, the kind of music that can calm any storm. When Michael tried to sell the house, I'd taken the chime down for safekeeping. I hadn't been able to look at it since. Now I hung it back on the porch beam. The first cold gust of wind set it singing, a sound like home returning. For a moment, I closed my eyes and let it wash over me like Linda whispering, "You're doing the right thing. Keep going." Before leaving, I needed to make one more set of calls. First, the U.S. Coast Guard local Rockport station. I spoke to Officer Harding, a man who'd known Linda from her volunteer work with shoreline preservation. "Evening, Walter. Everything all right? I need a property condition report," I said. "Exterior. Storm readiness. General safety notification." Harding didn't ask why. Just said, "We'll log it by midnight." Next, I called the Harbor View HOA, a group of retired fishermen, carpenters, and widows who guarded the coastline like it was the last sacred thing in Maine. I asked them to log the property as owner-occupied, returning to primary resident possession. In HOA language, that meant no trespassers, no buyers, no confusion. The house is his again. They promised to update the registry before morning. Everything was in motion, silent, precise, and completely invisible to the man who had tried to take everything from Maithe. I stepped outside, locked the front door, and breathed in the cold Atlantic night. The wind chime rang again. I looked at it and whispered, "Linda, the house is safe." I didn't expect anything in return, but something in the air, the shift of the wind, the soft chime, felt like acknowledgement. I turned to head back to my truck when my phone buzzed. A message from Michael. I stared at the screen for a full 10 seconds before opening it. "Dad, I messed up. Sophie's gone. The deal collapsed. I lost everything. Can I come home?" Home. The word punched me in the gut. Home. The place he sold. The place he betrayed. The place he never truly understood. My thumb hovered over the screen. I didn't reply. Not yet. The lesson wasn't over. Michael returned to Rockport on a Thursday afternoon, the kind of afternoon when the Atlantic wind carried salt, sharp enough to sting the eyes. I heard the crunch of gravel before I saw him, and for a moment I didn't move. I just stood inside the front hallway, feeling the house breathe around me, feeling Linda somewhere in the cedar-scented air. When the footsteps finally reached the porch, I opened the door. My son stood there, with a torn backpack, a 2-day beard, a look I had never seen on him before, something between exhaustion and shame. He used to walk with the confidence of a man who believed the world owed him a gentle path. But now, he looked like someone who had been chewed up and spit out by a life he wasn't built for. His voice cracked around the edges. "Dad, I'm sorry." Can I stay here for a while? I didn't tell him I had already taken the house back. I didn't tell him I had protected the last piece of Linda's heart before his betrayal could stain it further. I didn't tell him the legal storm was still gathering behind him. I just stepped aside and said quietly, "You can stay in the room facing the water." His shoulders dropped relief or defeat, I couldn't tell. "Thanks, Dad," he said barely above a whisper. He walked past me like a man entering a church he didn't believe in anymore, but desperately hoped might still seal him. Michael didn't know it, but the rules of this house changed long before he stepped back inside, and he needed to hear them. We stood in the kitchen, the one place Linda used to hum while chopping vegetables, the one place Michael used to sneak cookies before dinner. The memory of those simpler days hung thick in the air. "You can stay here," I said evenly, "but this house isn't a free bed." "Not anymore." He stared at me confused. "You want rent or something?" "No," I said. "I want effort." His brows drew together. "Effort work," I clarified. "Every adult under this roof works. You put in time, do what needs doing, and you keep this place alive. That's how you stay." He swallowed, the tension in his jaw shifting. "What kind of work?" "Any work you can get," I said. "And anything the house needs in the meantime." He looked down, nodding slowly. It was the first time I'd seen him agree to something, without arguing, since he was a teenager. The next morning, he went job hunting. Rockport is small. Opportunity comes in the form of calloused hands and early hours, not boardrooms or startup fantasies. By noon, he landed 2 part-time shifts, unloading fish barrels at the harbor. Cold work, heavy work, work that leaves your back screaming. Washing dishes at Dockside Grill. The kind of job people take when life has ice-watered them back to humility. When he told me, there was no pride in his voice, but no bitterness either. Just acceptance. Maybe the first real sign of a man I could still reach. The second sign came that evening. Michael trudged into the kitchen with clothes that smelled of brain and old haddock. He tried to slip past me, but someone else saw him first. May Sullivan. May lived 2 houses down, a widow of 11 years, silver hair, always tied in a loose bun, hands always smelling of lemon oil from the church pews she polished every Friday. She'd known Linda well, and she knew me even better than I wanted to admit. She stopped in the doorway when she saw Michael, her eyes soft but sharp. "Well," she said, smiling gently, "look what the tide dragged in." Michael tried awkwardly to smile back. "Hi, May." She carried a casserole dish toward the counter. "Brought supper." I had a feeling the house needed a little warmth tonight. Her glance flicked to me, measuring the distance between father and son, measuring the unspoken things in the room. She wasn't a gossip. She wasn't a meddler. But May noticed. And she noticed now. "You working down at the docks?" she asked Michael. He nodded. "Yeah. Started today." "Good," she said simply. "Hard work's honest work. Teaches a person who they are." Her eyes stayed on him for a beat too long, like she was reading through him, the way she read scripture, patient, careful, searching for truth beneath the surface. Then she touched my arm lightly before leaving. "You're doing right, Walt," she murmured. "Only I heard it." For a while things quieted. Michael worked dawn to afternoon at the harbor, evenings in the restaurant, and crashed every night in the room facing the water. Sometimes I heard him cough from the cold, salt air. Sometimes I heard him pacing. Sometimes I heard nothing but the steady rhythm of the tide, steadier than anything in our lives had been in months. But deep down, I knew peace never lasts long in the coast. Not when the past is still out there circling like a storm offshore. And sure enough, one came. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, slid through the mail slot, with a soft thump onto the cedar floor. A large white envelope, bank logo stamped in blue. I picked it up. Heavy. Too heavy. Before I even opened it, I knew this wasn't addressed to me. "Michael," I called. "Mail for you." He came down the stairs, wiping sleep from his eyes. His hair was a mess. His hands cracked from killed water and bleach. He took the envelope. For a moment, he just stared at it, like the weight of it pressed into his palms. Then he opened it. His face drained of color. His lips parted just slightly. His eyes moved faster down the page, wider, more panicked, until finally he whispered, "Oh my God." He sank into a chair. "What is it?" I asked quietly, though I already suspected. His voice was barely audible. "Dad, this is a notice of deficiency." He swallowed hard. "And a personal guarantee demand." He lifted his eyes to mine. "I signed as guarantor on the Houston deal." "I didn't know," I thought. "I didn't think, Dad. They're coming after me." His hands trembled around the paper. And in that moment, for the first time in years, my son looked 12 again. Back when he carved that accidental scar in Linda's workbench. Back when mistakes were small. Back when consequences could be sanded smooth with patience and love. But this mistake wasn't small. And this consequence would not sand away easily. I sat across from him. Not triumphant. Not sly. Just steady. Because the lesson was finally beginning. Michael stayed hunched over the notice for a long time, as if the paper were burning slowly through his hands. The kitchen felt colder than usual, the sea wind slipping under the door, rattling the panes just the way it did on storm nights, when Linda would whisper houses creak, because they're fighting to stay standing, just like people. I walked into the workshop, reached up to the pegboard, and took down the one thing that belonged to Linda more than anything else in this house. Her hammer. Sleek hickory handle. Steel head worn smooth along the claw, from decades of use. I had just retrieved it from the pawn shop. Rebecca's filings had pulled some miracles. When I returned to the kitchen, Michael finally looked up. "Dad, I don't know how to fix this." His voice had no arrogance left, just a kind of defeat that made him seem smaller than the man he used to pretend to be. I set the hammer gently on the table between us. "You can't fix everything at once," I said. "But you can fix a board, a window frame, a broken step, a lightly, one piece at a time." He stared at the hammer, like it was a memory he couldn't quite look in the eye. "That's Mom's," he whispered. "Yes," I said. "And if you want to stay here, you're going to work with me every day." He swallowed, fingers brushing the worn handle. "Dad, I haven't held a tool in years." Then it's time you remembered how. The next morning, we started with the deck boards. The winter storms had loosened a few cedar planks, and the nails were popping up like stubborn weeds. I handed him a pry bar. "Ease the nails out. Don't yank. Let the wood tell you where it wants to give." He tried brute force at first, but the cedar resisted, flexing instead of surrendering. After a few failed attempts, he looked at me, frustrated. I shook my head. "Your mother used to say wood doesn't respond to anger. Try listening." He tried again, slower this time. And on the third try, the nail slid free. Michael blinked at it, like he had just found a missing piece of himself. We replaced the boards, sanded them, and sealed them with the oil Linda used to mix herself. The scent orange cedar beeswax filled the air, and for a moment it felt like she was right there behind us, humming. Next came the roof patches. A nor'easter had torn through last year, ripping out shingles along the western edge. Michael climbed the ladder behind me, careful and quiet. Not the boy who used to scramble everywhere. The man who was finally learning caution. As he hammered in, the new flashing, his breath fogging in the cold, he asked quietly, "Did Mom do this work too?" I nodded. She hated sitting still. If something broke, she fixed it before I even knew it needed fixing. A small smile tugged at his mouth, one of those soft, almost forgotten smiles he used to give her when he was young. Later in the workshop, we cleaned the floors, reorganized tools, and started repairing a warped oak shelf Linda never finished. I handed Michael a chisel, not one of the new ones, but one she'd sharpened by hand, the handle burnished from years of use. He hesitated. "I'll ruin it," he muttered. "No," I said, "you ruin things when you don't care. And you care now." He set the chisel at a shallow angle and tried trimming the edge of the oak. The first pass splintered, the second shaved unevenly. But by the fifth pass, the wood curled away from the blade in a perfect ribbon. His eyes widened slowly, painfully, like a memory opening. "Mom taught me this, didn't she?" he asked. "Yes," I said softly. "When you were 9. He looked at the thin curl of oak in his hand and whispered, "I forgot how good it felt to make something." The transformation didn't happen all at once, but it happened. Michael canceled his credit cards, cut them with kitchen scissors one by one. He made a spreadsheet of every debt, from the smallest utility bill to the crushing personal guarantee from Houston. And he started paying. Not in chunks big enough to erase the problem, he didn't have that kind of money, but in small, stubborn increments that meant something. Every night after his shift at the restaurant, he'd come home too exhausted to climb the stairs. More than once, I found him asleep on the workbench bench, curled under an old shop blanket, smelling of fish and soap and cold air. He didn't complain. Not one ounce. He just worked. He fixed the porch rail. He rebuilt a cracked drawer. He cleaned the gutters. He sanded the workshop walls until the cedar glowed again. And with each task he grew a little quieter, a little humbler, a little more like the boy Linda raised before ambition and greed took him someplace cruel. May noticed too. She'd stop by after church, hand him cookies or leftover chowder, and say things like, "Hard work suits you, Michael. Makes a man's face honest." He never argued with her. He couldn't. Because somewhere between sawdust and exhaustion, he was turning back into someone who could be saved. Then, just when the house felt steady again, when Michael was beginning to stand straighter, despite the weight of his mistakes, I got a call. Rebecca. Her voice was calm but firm. "Walter, it's time." "For what?" Michael asked from across the room. I covered the receiver. "A meeting," I said. "Rebecca wants to go over your debt options." He looked relieved, almost grateful. Finally, he breathed. "Maybe she can tell me how to get my life back." He had no idea. The truth wasn't waiting to give him options. The truth was waiting to change everything. Rebecca's office felt different this time. The first time I came here, I was a man betrayed. The second time I was a man building a key to war. But this time I was a father walking into the moment he'd been preparing for since the day Linda handed me that wooden box. Michael walked beside me, shoulders tight, face still worn from long shifts at the harbor. He kept rubbing his thumb against his palm, a nervous tic he used to have as a child before school exams. He thought he was here for debt counseling. He had no idea he was about to face the truth. Rebecca opened the door to her office. The long conference table was already laid out, and on that table, like a lineup of secrets ready to testify, sat the quiet title judgment, stamped and certified, the voided sale paperwork, the revoked power of attorney 8 months before Linda died, the property title in my name alone, the UCC filings showing Linda's tools were returning under Article 2403, voidable title reclaimed, a folder with photographs of the beach house condition taken by Coast Guard and HOA, and one last envelope sealed in wax. Linda's seal. Michael stared at the table as if it were an autopsy of his own life. Rebecca motioned for him to sit. "Michael," she began, calm as a winter tide, "you need to see exactly where you stand." He swallowed, eyes scanning each document until they landed on the one thing he recognized, the fraudulent sale. "Wait, this "This is the beach house sale," he stammered. What does this?" Rebecca answered for him. "The sale has been voided. Your signature carried no legal authority. The property was never yours to sell." Michael blinked fast, then shook his head. "No, that can't, Dad. I thought you said, Dad. I thought you didn't own. Why didn't you tell me?" He looked at me, like a drowning man, finally realizing the shore had been behind him the whole time. I didn't sit. I stood with both hands on the back of a chair, grounding myself. "Because if I'd saved you early," I said quietly, "you'd spend your life waiting to be saved again." Michael's breath hitched. You knew. You knew the sale failed, the deed, everything. And you let me. You let me go to the docks, the restaurant. You let me freeze, starve, panic." "Yes," I said. "Because I couldn't lie now. Not here." "You let me drown," he whispered. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I let you learn how to swim." His face crumpled, not in anger, in understanding. Painful, late understanding. Rebecca interlaced her fingers, giving him a moment before speaking again. "There's more you need to see." She slid the revoked power of attorney toward him. "This was void before your mother passed," she said, "meaning every transaction you attempted was unauthorized." Michael pressed his palms against his forehead. "Oh God, Mom knew I might." His voice broke. He couldn't finish the sentence. "She saw the storm coming," I said. "She was never blind to who you were becoming." Then Rebecca gently pushed a stack of papers forward. "UCCC Article 2403. And Linda's tools," she said. "They are being returned. The pawnshop's title was voidable. They never had the right to keep them." Michael's eyes went wide. "That means, Dad, you got everything back." I nodded once. "And you let me think," Michael whispered, "that everything was gone. Gone because of me." His voice cracked into a sound I hadn't heard in days. The sound of a boy lost. Then Rebecca did something I didn't expect. She picked up the wax-sealed envelope and placed it directly in front of Michael. "Your mother left this," she said softly, with instructions. "Only give this to Michael when he has fallen far enough to see clearly. Walter told me everything you've been through these past weeks." She pushed it closer. "I think you're ready." Michael stared at the envelope with trembling hands. MLH, Linda's initials pressed into the wax. He traced the seal with his thumb, as if touching it might summon her voice from the past. He looked at me, eyes full of questions he wasn't ready to ask, and I nodded. With shaking fingers, he broke the wax. Inside was a single page. He unfolded it slowly, like it was a fragile fragment of his childhood. And then he read. I didn't look. It wasn't mine to read. But I heard him gasp, heard the air leave his lungs. He clutched the letters with both hands, shoulders shaking. Then Mom. One word. One broken, aching word. A sound that split the years wide open. He bent forward, elbows on his knees, forehead pressed to the paper, crying in the quiet, steady way men cry when they are truly broken open, when they finally see themselves clearly. Rebecca stepped back. Respectful. I stayed standing. Because Linda had asked me to let this moment happen, no matter how hard it was to watch. Michael finally looked up at me through red-rimmed eyes. Dad. She still believed in me. I nodded. In who you could be, not the man you were. He covered his face, sobbing harder. But underneath the tears I saw it. The shift. The beginning. The boy who carved his name into Linda's workbench was alive again. Just when the room had settled into a fragile quiet, Rebecca's phone buzzed. A new email. She frowned. Walter, you'll want to see this. She turned the screen toward me. From Sophie Henderson, subject property contribution. Claim, Hayes Coastal Home. My jaw tightened before I even read the message. I'm entitled to my share of the Rockport beach house. I contributed significantly to the yard renovation and deck improvements during my marriage to Michael. We need to discuss my legal portion before I file a claim. Michael went white. Oh no, Dad. Dad, I swear she didn't pay for anything. She didn't even lift a... This can't. But the storm had already arrived. The quiet war was about to become a public one. I exhaled slowly. Rebecca squared her shoulders. Looks like the next battle just found us. The first warning came from the Coast Guard, a clipped radio announcement that shivered through the static nor'easter approaching. Gale force winds. Secure property immediately. It was the same tone I'd heard years ago, the year Linda and I stayed up all night against a storm that threatened to swallow our deck whole. Michael had been 12 asleep on the couch while Linda hammered plywood with a determination that could have pushed the tide back on its own. Now, decades later, the storm returned. But this time the house wasn't the only thing under attack. Sophie struck the same day the wind began to scream. She filed through her attorney, a sharp, opportunistic man from Boston, claiming equitable interest in the beach house. Her argument, that she had substantially contributed to the deck renovation and yard improvements during her marriage to Michael. Michael nearly tore the letter in half when he read it. Dad, she didn't pay for a damn thing. She didn't even plant the hydrangeas. Mom did that the summer before. His voice faltered. I put a hand on his shoulder. We know the truth. Now we just have to prove it. Rebecca arrived that afternoon with a folder thick enough to knock down a door. She wants equitable interest. Rebecca scoffed. She'll get equitable humiliation. She opened the folder like a general revealing troop formations. 1. Chain of title. Every deed from the day Linda and I bought the land to the final transfer into the trust she created. No joint ownership. No marital contribution. No shared equity. Sophie had exactly 0 claim. 2. Material receipts. Every plank screw and gallon of stain for the deck came from the Portland furniture shop Linda invested in. All paid in full under her account. Stamped, documented, traceable. Renovations funded by your late wife's business, Rebecca said. Not a penny from Sophie. 3. HOA and Coast Guard photographs. Time-stamped pictures showing Sophie lounging with a cocktail on the deck while Linda and I rebuilt it, along with HOA maintenance logs proving she never attended a single improvement meeting. Michael laughed a dry, incredulous sound. She said she planted the rose bushes. Linda planted those, I said softly. The day before her biopsy. Rebecca placed one final photo on the table. Sophie, in a sun hat, reclining on a deck chair, while I knelt beside Linda adjusting a level board. That, Rebecca said, is our case, and her funeral. Just as she finished laying out the evidence, the wind slammed against the windows. The house groaned long, low, familiar. Dad, Michael said, looking toward the porch, we need to brace the west side. He didn't wait for my answer. He grabbed his jacket and the hammer, the same hammer Linda once used, and headed for the door. I followed. The storm hit like a freight train. Sheets of salt water lashed sideways across the deck. The roofline moaned. The world flickered white with lightning. Grab the sandbags, I shouted. Michael hauled them 2 at a time, something he never could have done months ago. We worked in perfect wordless rhythm. Tarps secured, plywood up, cross braces hammered tight, gutters cleared, doors low-latched, windows shielded. The porch shook with the force of the wind vibrating through the boards into our bones, the kind of storm that tests a house and the people in it. Flashback folded into the present, like layers of a tide. Linda's voice shouting over the gale. Higher, Walt. The water rises fastest on the west side. Linda's hair soaking wet. As she handed me nails, her laughter ringing despite the storm. Linda's small hand squeezing mine. When we finished, her whisper. This house holds because we hold. Now it was Michael beside me, older, bruised by life hair, whipping like his mother's once did. One wave slammed so hard the porch railing shuddered. Michael steadied it with both arms, shouting, "Dad, get the last brace in." I did. For a moment, we just stood there, soaked to the bone, breathing hard, the storm roaring around us. Then Michael whispered, barely audible through the wind, "She would have loved this." The fight of it. I looked at him, really looked, and saw a man, finally worthy of her memory. 2 days later, when the storm passed and the ocean calmed to a restless sleep, the court issued its decision. Rebecca read it aloud in her office, lips curling with satisfaction. Petitioner Sophie Henderson's claim is denied for lack of standing and lack of demonstrable contribution. Furthermore, the court finds the claim frivolous and awards attorney's fees to respondent Walter Hayes. Case dismissed. Michael exhaled with so much relief it nearly broke him in half. She's gone. No more claims, no more anything, Rebecca said. If she tries again, she'll be laughed out of the county. Michael sat back stunned. I didn't smile. Victory wasn't what this was about. It was about justice. Quiet, simple, necessary justice. Rebecca closed the folder and turned to me. That's the last storm for now, Walter. I wished I could believe her. That evening, back at the house, the three of us, me, Michael, the wind, walked into the workshop. The place still smelled like sawdust and cold salt air. Linda's tools hung neatly again. Her workbench sat waiting. Michael lingered near the bench, fingers tracing the carved mark he made at 12 years old. His voice was soft when he spoke. Dad, there's one thing I want. I braced myself for a request about money, a bailout, a plea. But instead, he looked at me with the eyes of that 12-year-old boy, again the one Linda adored. Can you teach me, he said quietly, how to rebuild Mom's bench seat? The long one she started before she got sick. I want to finish it. Properly. Not the way I used to do things. I stared at him for a long moment. He wasn't asking for rescue. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for craft, for memory, for a chance to honor his mother through work. Slowly I nodded. Yeah, I said, voice thick. Yeah, son, I can teach you. And for the first time since Linda died, the workshop felt like a place where something could grow again. The ocean always gives something back after a storm, even if it's broken, swollen, and scarred. 2 mornings after the nor'easter, Michael found it. A long slab of driftwood bleached by salt and sun, heavy as regret. He dragged it up the sand toward the workshop, panting, his boots sinking in the wet shore. Dad, he called out, breath clouding in the cold air. I think this is it. For Mom's bench. I stepped out onto the porch and stared. A single board, thick and warped, but with a grain that curled like the memory of a song. Yes, Linda would have chosen this one. We carried it inside, the weight of it settling between us, like a shared truth. The workshop smelled of cedar and old winters. Dust motes drifted in the slanted morning light. Linda's tools hung above us, patient, waiting. Michael stood before the slab, like a student before an altar. What do we do first, he asked. I handed him a carpenter's pencil, the same one Linda always tucked behind her ear. First, I said, we listen. He frowned. I smiled. Wood talks if you know what you're hearing. Come closer. He leaned in. I guided his hand across the grain. Feel that, I asked. It's uneven. That's a live edge. Like a life that never quite ran straight. I pointed to a darker line twisting through the middle. And that a crack, he said, a checking line. Where the wood split because it dried too fast. I paused, letting the metaphor settle. Happens to people too. Michael nodded, keyed, absorbing more than carpentry. We began. For the next days, our routine became its own rhythm. Measure twice, mark the cut, let the saw breathe through the wood, smooth the edges, follow the grain's truth instead of forcing our own. Michael learned to set the square properly, to hold the chisel without fear, to run the plane until ribbons of cedar curled onto the floor, like shavings of memory. At night, he iced the raw ache in his shoulders. In the mornings, he returned earlier than I did. One afternoon, while sanding the bench seat, he spoke without looking up. "Dad, I think I want to do this. For real. Woodworking. Building things that last." I didn't interrupt. I let him finish. "I'll pay my debts myself. I don't want your money, not the trust, not the accounts. I need to stand on my own feet." I felt an old knot loosen inside me. "Your mother would be proud," I said. "No," he answered, quiet sanding slower. "She'd be relieved." Chase. It was Michael's idea to turn the house into something bigger. We were cleaning the porch, stacking sandbags for the next storm season, when he said, "This place shouldn't just be ours, Dad." I looked at him unsure. He gestured toward the long coastline, the scattered boats, the town where storms took more each year. "There are widows here, and fishermen who can't work winters, old men sleeping in trucks when the power goes out." He swallowed. "I did enough damage. Maybe I can build something that gives back." I leaned against the railing. "What are you thinking?" He took a breath. "A storm shelter. For the coldest nights. A place for people who don't have anywhere else to go." My heart thudded, slow, full. "And you want to open our doors?" I asked. "Mom always said a house isn't a home unless it holds other people." He gave a small, shy smile. "I guess I want her to live here even now." I nodded. Then I nodded again, because I couldn't speak for a moment. May stepped in before we even asked. "I've got blankets from the church," she said. "And old space heaters. The good ones, not the kind that set curtains on fire." She recruited volunteers from the harbor, from Sunday choir, from widowers who'd lost their wives and were aching for a place to belong. The first night we opened the doors, wind carried the smell of brine through the hall. 7 people came. Old Roger from the pier, 2 widows from South End, a retired fisherman with a bad hip, a woman who'd lost power 3 times that month, and May bustling around like a general in wool socks. We served clam chowder so hot it fogged the windows. The heater hummed. Blankets rustled. Someone told a joke about sinking boats. Someone else laughed so hard they cried. Michael watched it all from the doorway, his shoulders unclenching for the first time in years. He leaned toward me. "Dad, it feels like the house finally took a breath." I nodded. "It's been waiting." The bench took shape slowly, like forgiveness. On the morning we finished it, the workshop was bright with winter sunlight. Michael smoothed the last edge with a care he never had as a younger man. "It's ready," he whispered. We carried it out to the porch, exactly where Linda always wanted it, facing the sea, angled just enough to catch the afternoon light. When Michael set it down, the wooden legs fit the deck perfectly, as if the boards remembered where they belonged. We sat there, no words at first. Just the ocean, just the wind, just the sound of a house finally alive again. Then Michael said, "Thank you, Dad." "For what?" "For letting me fall." He exhaled. "And for letting me get up." The town insisted on a small dedication. May, the church volunteers, the old fishermen, who now called this porch their winter haven. A paper banner hung above the door, "Linda's Rest." At the end of the gathering, as the last bowls were washed and stacked, I noticed something strange inside the hallway. A loose board just slightly angled. I pressed it. It shifted. Behind it, scribbled in pencil, faint, but unmistakably her handwriting, "This house is meant to hold people together. Linda." My breath caught. Michael stepped beside me. "Dad, what is it?" I showed him. He touched the writing gently like it might disappear. "She knew," he whispered. "Yes," I said. "Your mother always knew." Winter arrived softly that year. No violent storms, no angry tides, just a hush rolling in from the Atlantic, the kind that settles over Rockport like a wool blanket. The kind Linda used to call the quiet season, when even the gulls spoke in whispers. That night, the house glowed against the darkness. Lanterns hung along the porch, their amber light flickering on the cedar shingles. Inside the stove hummed the floorboards, creaked with familiar warmth and voices from earlier. A few widows dropping off by May, leaving extra blankets faded into a calm, so deep you could almost hear the ocean breathing. Michael and I sat on the bench we'd built, cups of hot cider warming our hands. Snow flurries drifted sideways, dissolving before they reached the waves. For a long while we didn't talk. Then he broke the stillness. "Dad," he said, voice low, "I've been thinking about everything: Houston, Mom's letter, the shelter, all of it." I didn't interrupt. He took a slow breath, steadying himself. "I don't want any of the money. Not the trust, not the investments, not the house." He looked out at the dark horizon. "I don't need any of it." The wind nudged the wind chime above us. Linda's shells threaded by her own hands. Their sound was soft like a sigh. "What do you need, son?" I asked. He turned toward me, eyes clear in a way I'd never seen on him before. "You." His voice cracked. "And a chance to become the man Mom hoped I'd be." The admission hit me like a wave, quick but immense. I set down my mug and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You already are," I said. "Not because I saved you, because you saved yourself." Michael blinked hard, swallowing the ache behind his ribs. For the first time in years I saw peace settle across his face, thin but steady, like the first sheet of ice across a harbor. The next morning, the sky broke open into a pale pearly blue. We walked down to the beach carrying a small wooden box, one Linda carved herself during her last summer, when her hands still obeyed her heart more than her body. Inside the box was a handful of sand from her favorite cove, a few curls of cedar shavings from her workshop, and a note she'd written long before either of us knew we'd need it. "Scatter me where the tide returns. I'll come back with the morning." We dug a small hollow at the edge of the waterline. No ceremony, no speeches, just the truth of the moment. Michael placed the box inside his hands, unsteady, but sure. "It's it. Mom," he whispered, "I'm home now." When we covered it with sand, the wind shifted suddenly, sharp, sweet, familiar, and Linda's wind chime sang from the porch, a cascade of hot clinks meeting the rising tide. May watched from a distance, hands tucked into her coat, eyes bright in the morning sun. The ocean rolled forward, touched the sand where Linda rested, and pulled back gently, as if nodding. That afternoon, the house filled with the small comforts of winter. A pot of chowder simmering, the smell of pine logs crackling, the muffled laughter of volunteers reorganizing blankets, May humming a church tune in the kitchen. It didn't feel like charity. It felt like family expanding. Michael tightened the last window latch, dusted his hands, and sat beside me at the long bench once more. "Dad," he said softly, "I want to keep building here. For real. Not just furniture. I want to build lives somehow. I don't know how yet, but you will," I said. He nodded. Night settled slow and silver. The ocean mirrored the moon, and frost edged the porch rails like lace. We were closing up the workshop when something unexpected happened. A thud overhead. Then another. Something shifting inside the roof frame somewhere above the rafters Linda and I installed 30 years ago. "Probably a squirrel," Michael said. But the sound was too heavy, too deliberate. We climbed the ladder. Snow dusted our shoulders as we opened the narrow attic crawl space. Inside, half buried under old tarps and a forgotten life jacket, was a long flat envelope, yellowed by time, edges curled like old photographs. I reached for it slowly. My fingers trembled before I even touched it. Linda's handwriting was on the front. For later. When the house needs to grow again. Michael knelt beside me, breath caught in his throat. Dad. That I opened the flap. Inside were pages, sketches, notes, measurements in pencil, a top-down drawing of the backyard leading all the way to the dune grass. Linda's unmistakable lines, her clean angles, her curves that made wood feel like water. At the top of the page, Backyard Expansion Phase 2. Below it, a title underlined twice, Community Deck and Garden for the Winters Ahead. Michael let out a shaky breath. She planned another build, he whispered. No, I corrected gently. She planned our next build. We sat there under the roof. She designed snow tapping the shingles above us, the smell of cedar drifting up from below. I closed the envelope carefully. Well, son, I said, looks like your mother just gave us our spring project. Michael laughed, a true laugh this time, warm and full, carrying through the rafters and down into the workshop. The wind chime outside answered. And the house, our house, Linda's house, seemed to breathe again. A new season waiting, a new project calling, a new beginning carved into the wood of our lives.